Oh, years ago, there were a bunch of my constituents.
Up in the Wamego area.
No, I never knew this before. So it's just in Shawnee County.
They go by various groups in different states. I haven't looked into it, but my guess is there's a network out there connected organizations like right. Tom tucked up and he saw me in the parking lot this morning in his car. And he said his wife was like you had your hair done. I told him I'd ask her about that. He goes, no.
I'm right. That's okay. It's hard. Last night I was watching the press conference and somebody said that stay home or get her haircut and color and whatever. I said, man, this doesn't work. I said I tried putting the movies on it in college once, but I was Daniel's time on the sun, so and I said, and I got my hair cut on the last day before the stay-at-home went into effect. I said, I'm getting to the point where I do need to trim them. I think I'm going to have to ask my husband to do that. The thought of that scared me to death. So, yeah.
You might look. I'm seriously, that's the kind of thing people receive. I mean, it was very funny.
A couple more weeks of this will be coming in with ponytails.
I got a.
I just saw something.
Well, you can get away with it. I don't particularly want
I
that.
just saw something where this beauty supply company did this online, and they'll teach you how to do your hair. So
I got.
you're watching that.
I get my hair cut in Lawrence. She sent me a message yesterday saying she's had to put you back on May 6th. I mean,
People are going to have bandanas. But it's
Hey,
gonna be around their heads.
Deb you can just do those man buns. Those are my favorite.
Scrunchies for men.
Hey, it's a new business line. I can think about this. Okay. All right, we ready to go? All right, so good afternoon. So as usual, we'll go ahead and get started with the daily tracking numbers. Okay, as of today, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment has announced that we now have 1,588 confirmed positive cases of COVID-19. That's up 94 from yesterday. We're still reporting cases in 63 of the 105 counties. And our death rate has now reached 80, up 4 from yesterday. Later this afternoon, I will be participating in a call with President Trump and Vice President Pence. And as I mentioned yesterday, discussions are underway at the state level about how to reopen our economy safely and swiftly. Almost every state, 90% of the state's population remains under a stay-at-home order as we speak. Both Republican and Democratic governors across the nation have resisted political pressure to hastily reopen because they have committed to making data-driven decisions, allowing science and medical professionals to determine the best, safest timing, not politics. And that goes for Kansas too. And what the science tells us, in addition to public health experts, business leaders, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, is that robust testing and contact tracing capacity is the key to getting our people back to work as quickly as possible. I share all Kansans' worry and angst about an extended shutdown, but the reality is that we do not yet have the supplies we need to reopen, nor have we reached the apex of this outbreak. I'm hopeful that today's discussion with our federal partners will be productive and that it will shed more light on their plan to help states get the testing supplies that will be necessary to move forward promptly. Of course, even after we finalize a plan to safely reopen, it's clear that thousands of Kansans might not have jobs to return to immediately. Today, I'm joined by my Secretary of Labor, Delia Garcia, in addition to my Secretary of Administration, D'Angela Burns-Wallace, to provide an update on the additional steps being taken to process an historic volume of unemployment claims. As I've capacity of the system so that it works faster, and they are making substantial progress. The number of weekly claims processed since early March has increased by over 1,200%. We also remain hopeful that federal stimulus dollars will provide some additional resources to revive earlier modernization efforts. But I also wanted to address some misleading claims that have circulated in recent days about what led to this moment. Between 2003 and 2011, the department invested roughly $47 million in IT modernization. Those dollars included federal funds in addition to some bonding. That modernization project upgraded functionality in many areas, but did not fully address core problems created by the use of a computer mainframe that was originally put into service in the 1970s. Unfortunately, the modernization was never completed. It was halted abruptly in early 2011, which included terminating the project and releasing all of the vendors who had been working on the modernization. As a result, the transition from the mainframe never occurred. These problems were made quite apparent during my administration's transition in late 2018. As Secretary Garcia will detail, she spent all of last year working to develop a viable path forward so we could get our IT infrastructure back on track. That effort included site visits last year to Mississippi and Idaho, as well as regular meetings with the National Association of State Workforce Agencies technical staff. Now, none of this history pays the bills of Kansas families in need, but the current crisis does provide an important teachable moment for all elected officials, especially those responsible for enacting a state budget. Government-funded infrastructure is complex and it is expensive, no matter what kind of infrastructure it might be: roads, bridges, broadband, customer service staff, and, yes, information technology. We must do a better job of prioritizing these investments before disaster strikes and factoring potential consequences of inaction into the legislative process. Years of severe budgets, coupled with political demands to reduce the size of government, have now created tangible consequences at the Department of Labor. For example, in 2013, the Kansas legislature limited access to unemployment insurance, cutting the time Kansans could qualify from 26 weeks to 16 weeks. 7 years later, this required the department to stop what it was doing last month, just as the volume began to skyrocket, so they could reprogram the system to revert back to the original 26-week limit as required to draw down federal funds. That's just one example. Another related example could be cited last spring when a budget enhancement that I requested for a statewide technology system was reduced by 50%, complicating another ongoing statewide IT project that had been launched years earlier. No one has been more vocal than I have about exercising fiscal restraint over the last year and a half. But moving forward, I hope this crisis will shed light on why key investments in government infrastructure must be taken seriously. As I've said many times before, this is an all-hands-on-deck moment. Moving forward, agency staff will continue to work extended hours. Our workers reassigned from other agencies will continue to pitch in, and the agency will also be hiring new employees to help answer the phones. My administration will also remain in regular communication with Kansas legislators about this issue and all of our coronavirus response efforts. Earlier this week, the Department of Labor sent all legislators information about filing and payment dates, in addition to a toolkit that includes resource links, frequently asked questions, and more. We are also continuously updating the Department of Labor website and social media accounts with new information and guidance as we receive it. We all have to work together to get Kansans the information they need at this uncertain and very stressful time. And with that, I will turn it over to the Secretary of Labor, Delia Garcia.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. I would like to provide you all with an update of our unemployment system at the Kansas Department of Labor, including where we were, where we are, and the solutions planned to move us forward. But first, I want to genuinely acknowledge Kansans who are scared, angry, frustrated, and their status, and want to know the status of their benefits. My staff and I share the same sentiments and are trying our very hardest to serve our hardworking Kansans. Because you see, this is not just a job for me, this is personal. My own family had to shut down our family restaurant around our 57th anniversary. They too are unemployed. The same struggles with our system that many of our Kansans are too. Also, my Kansas Department of Labor staff have family members who are also lost their jobs and struggling as well. And we are all here working long hours around the clock every day for all of our Kansas families. I hear your heartbreaking stories, and I cannot begin to tell you how badly we want to do as much as we can for you, as fast as we can, for you to receive your unemployment benefit payments, so you can put food on your tables and pay your rent or mortgages. So now I'll take the opportunity to share the steps I have taken to continue steps forward. When I began this role a year ago, my first priority, as the governor mentioned, was to modernize our over 40-year-old system that Kansas has used since 1977, which is around the time I was born. As Governor Kelly shared yesterday, that this inherited system is held together with what seems with Band-Aids. Our fellow Kansans deserve better than a 40-year-old system, and last year, when I assumed my role, along with Governor Kelly, we coordinated what to do and rolled up our sleeves and made a plan. And over the last year, my Kansas Department of Labor IT team has worked to develop the necessary feasibility study, researched capability models, and partnered with national resources, including the Informational Technology Support Center and our National Association of State Workforce Agencies, as well as other states that are in various stages of their own modernization to prepare our own modernization project, beginning with the RFP process, which was slated for early next year. Then came this perfect storm. This crisis hit, and now we are constrained with this patchwork system and dealing with the unprecedented amount of claims and traffic. We will not stop fighting to give our fellow Kansans the help that they need. So this nationwide issue is because federal state structures are prohibitive and preparedness a necessary maintenance system, especially when a crisis hits. So I would like to share that we've been in this situation, as you know, as a solid 4 weeks. In the first week, I'd like to share that we began working long hours, filed about 23,000 claims compared to the previous week of about 1,800 claims. And we began to create a communications plan. The following week was our second week, and I recruited former and retired employees with the special skill set doubling my staff as we filed about 55,000 claims that week. And then we began our daily Facebook Live updates to our Kansans with an audience of over 500,000. And at the end of that week, the CARES Act was passed, and Governor Kelly signed the federal agreement to accept the federal funds. Then, the third week, I increased my staff from 40 to 60 internally at the Kansas Department of Labor and extended our hours to include Saturday mornings from 8 a.m. to 12 noon. And I'd like to thank Governor Kelly for directing the largest state employee transfer in the history of Kansas, where over 100 laptops were brought to allow more people to work safely from home. And we were able to file an additional 50,000 additional claims that week. And then last week was our fourth week, where we finally received federal guidance on the CARES Act, added an IT SWAT team with some of the best IT minds, and thanks to the governor for that support, we added also the triage call center, adding the ability to answer 4 to 5 more times calls and 85 state employees, which I am grateful to the Department of Commerce and the Department of Agriculture for their support, equaling about 150 team members, including also filing another 30,000 initial claims. That's a total of 160,484 initial claims in the last 4 weeks. And as we saw the state level drop, we also saw this morning the national level drop to 5,245,000, which was a decrease as well. And on Monday alone of this week, we had over 1 million calls and internet claims. We are up about 7,000%. So beginning over the 4 weeks ago, we've also engaged legislators, unions, business leaders, and all of you media, and partnering to sharing our information to our Kansans to be informed on our process and resources. Another step I am announcing today is our new filing process, which will be posted all day today on our social media and our website. And I have hard copies for you as well on the table. In an effort to relieve some of the strain placed on our IT systems by the overwhelming number of claims at the same time, we are asking claimants to file on certain days by the first letter of their last name. This process is called gating and will ensure Kansans access to file. If you need to file unemployment applications, your last name begins with the letter A through M. You can file a claim on Sunday afternoon, Tuesday, or Thursday. If you need to file an unemployment application and your last name begins with N through Z, you file the claim on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. Saturdays will be reserved for anyone who has not previously been able to file a weekly claim. And an important note to please remember that claims filed on either Sunday or Monday, you will still be paid at the same time. There is no disadvantage to you if your last name is Zook, for example, and you file on Monday instead of Sunday. By participating in our gating program, you will help to ensure that all Kansans are eligible for unemployment insurance benefits and will also have access to the system. We would like you to please share the graphic that we'll be sharing on our website and social media. The website, again, is www.kansasbenefits.gov, so more Kansans can participate. This is a practice that many states in the country have tried, including our neighboring state of Colorado, who has shared information on the process. Another announcement, a new development, is we are hiring, starting today, it is posted on our website, over Kansas Department of Labor employees. We will train weekly smaller classes to respect the social distancing safety measures. This normally takes about 6 months, but we are doing this in 3 weeks with a new class added every 2 weeks because we know Kansans need the help now. This job is posting available, like I said, is on our website at www.dol.ks.gov. And finally, another piece of major good news. We have had progress with implementing the code and additional information on the $600. We are in the final phase of testing, and we hope to get people those benefits as soon as the final phase of testing is complete, which may be as early as next week. There is a light at the end of this tunnel, and we are moving towards it. The additional help is on its way. Hundreds of thousands of Kansans have been reached through improvements of our system, our UI system, and continue to serve more each day. And we won't be done until we have served every Kansan who is entitled for their benefits. Our Department of Labor team is working around the clock to serve our fellow Kansans and a number of priority to making sure they get their benefits. More and more people are receiving our services, and like other states, Kansas is seeing the highest number of claims since the Great Depression, and many of those claims came within 2.5-week period. This is a process, and every day, more and more Kansans are getting their benefits, and we will get all eligible Kansans their benefits as they are due. Please continue to follow us on our social media and share our graphics that will be able to inform our fellow Kansans. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank my colleague, Secretary Burns-Wallace, for her support and partnership in this process, and I'd like to pass it over to her now.
Good afternoon. As the Chief Information Technology Officer, I would like to take a moment to explain a few steps that have happened with the IT team that has helped to improve our capacity. So as you've heard, the unemployment insurance benefit and tax system is a mainframe-driven system. And over the last few weeks, the volume of the claims has truly overloaded our system, but it didn't completely break it. At the initial surge of the demand, we assembled what I would call an IT SWAT team. That team has provided relief to our strained system resources. We've been able to add efficiencies in code and to add a little bit more processing power to our systems. A good analogy would be we are driving an older, massive vehicle down a road. Stop to put on new tires and upgrade that horsepower because it just wasn't pushing through. That I mentioned and we deployed, we were able to pull in developers, network specialists, mainframe specialists, programmers, and many others, consisting of course, the IT operations at the Department of Labor, but we resources from the Office of Information Technology Services, OITS, as well as our external partners, Rocket Software, App Dynamics, Insano, Microsoft, and a few other private partners. We have involved all of them in this process. We are now in a place where we are processing closer to optimal levels to try to help meet the demand. We've been monitoring and working through over the last few weeks. This team has worked tirelessly to get to this upgraded place. On Tuesday, many of you know, we temporarily took the system down, and that has significantly increased the capacity. We processed over 4,000 initial claims and about 42,000, a little bit over 42,000 weekly claims that day. Earlier in our crisis, just to give perspective, we were averaging about 14,000 claims a day, and prior to the pandemic, our daily average was close to 600. So you can see we're moving in the right direction to increase that capacity, but there is definitely more to be done, and we will continue to monitor and be diligent in this process. Additionally, in order to process more claims and to help more people get through the system, we have temporarily suspended the ability to check claim status. Under the current configuration, checking claim status basically ties up the system just as much as filing a claim. And so what we have done is we're receiving tens of thousands of claim checks. Understandably, people want to know the status of their claims. It becomes a push and a pull, a no-win situation, and we understand that people want to know that status. We are working to restore the ability to check the claims, and as we recognize that this information is important for you to be able to access. What we will be providing, and I believe the Department of Labor will be providing on their website, is a chart that shows an estimate of the day that you filed, and it shows what day your funds would be released. In the meantime, as we work to restore the claim status feature on the website in a way that does not slow down the website in the ability to process regular claims. I will say that there are additional enhancements in the works. As was mentioned earlier, we are working the codes for the 26-week extension that the governor mentioned that was provided by the legislature earlier this year. We also are working 13-week extension that comes from the Federal CARES Act. Both are being finalized and are currently being tested. and we are bringing to bear over 50 unique resources around this work to ensure that this processing, once they are put in, work efficiently and effectively to deliver these resources. We do believe most of these are days away. As the Secretary mentioned, the $600 additional amount, that is actually in final test, and our goal is to put that into operation next week. We will share additional information when that is ready to go live. This is a process, but every day, more and more Kansans are getting their benefits. We know that this has been a difficult time, and we are working diligently to make going forward better. We continue to serve more and more each day, and we will not be done until we have served every Kansas who is entitled for their benefits. Thank you.
For Secretary Griswold, can you explain, for most people hearing a computer from 1970, it's still operational, what does that mean, and what would it look like if it was from today versus then?
So when you talk about the age of systems, it's multi-layer, right? And so over the years, there have been parts of the systems that have been upgraded. But when you do a full modernization process, it's layers. So it's not just the mainframe, it's also the systems that sit on top of the mainframe. It's a combination of both hardware and software. And where we were in the process was actually completing that modernization project that was mentioned earlier to bring all the systems into a modern state, which could include again, an upgrade of software, but an upgrade of hardware, but it's also about the architecture of the system, right? So remember when I talked about our daily average was around 600, and then we jumped to 1,400 in the crisis and really need the capacity to be able to, on particular days, do 40 or 50,000, right? So the architecture of the current system that we have, it is scalable, but it's not infinite. So as it started, couldn't hold the severity of the scale because it's unprecedented. We've never seen that scale before. At the height of a recession, we saw processing that might have been around 1,800 or 2,000 a day, and now we're talking about 50,000. So when you move to a more modern system, the idea is that it does have that pure scalability where it can adjust to the demands of a system, but it's multi-layered, right? It's also why these modernization projects are not something that are done kind of easily. They're not done overnight. It takes a period of time because you're talking about multiple layers in the system that have to be worked through.
You were here then, speaking to the governor's plan for the 2005 time frame when roughly $47 million was spent to quote unquote modernize the system. Can you describe, was that the overlay system, I mean, the Oracle overlay on top of the mainframe? I mean, what was that money spent on?
So what I will say is that, as the governor mentioned, there were parts of the system that were upgraded and modernized, and then there were parts that weren't. One of the most recent pieces, which was the last piece that was done, which was in 2015, actually had to do with our interface between our web and our mainframe. Our mainframe is actually fairly solid. It is still sitting on some older technology, but the mainframe itself and that interface is solid. We've been working with our partners. In this case, the mainframe partners are Insono, and we have a very solid and stable connection there. That web interface, which was built in 2015, is where we were seeing a little bit of a hiccup of that scalability. And so is that, I don't see it the way they do, so that's why I had to clarify. In that space, and that partner is Rocket Software, and they've been, again, right alongside with us, trying to work that to move that scalability back.
So would it be fair to say that part of the problem is getting these two systems to communicate to one another efficiently in a crisis situation?
I would say it would be partially say the reality is about that scalability, right? A modern system starts to remove some of that push and pull of a system trying to push itself, right? You build a modernized architecture that actually is much more nimble, so much more agile.
Versus the one that we just kind of built on top of the old one.
Exactly.
Quick question for Secretary Garcia.
two things on numbers for starters. The drop in initial unemployment claims was somewhat significant. It was like 40% week over week, which seems, and I'm not saying you're contradicting,
No.
which seems to belie the number, the calls coming in seem to belie the number of claims actually decreasing. Why are those dropping? Do you guys have any idea?
No.
Certainly things aren't getting that much better.
No, as we said, I said earlier, the national numbers also went down. I don't know what that would be contributed to, but we do know is that we continue to file claims.
Does that have anything to do with people getting frustrated and maybe giving up?
I don't think people are giving up because I know people need to pay their bills and tables. But I think it's just the process of continuing to try. And now that we have, more capacity, we'll continue to do that.
What's your advice to self-employed people that haven't seen any of the $600 yet from the federal government? Do they keep applying each week? Do they wait till next week now? Can it all come at once? What do you tell them?
Yeah, thank you. The question was for the self-employed. So that is under the new program called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, also known as PUA. Since that is a brand new program, we are still in the process of building that. So the best piece of advice I would say now is to go ahead and file a claim, and then you would have that, proof of denial that would get you through. You do not have to do anything extra or additional because we will have you in our system, and then that will move over to PUA.
We were seeing, someone said that on the website, they're still getting that denial, so do they have to call to be able to get that? 'Cause
No, they do not have to call to get that, and also the capability of the calls would not work. So it's, again, filing and making sure you save the denial piece, we will have you in the system, so there's no need to do any extra work.
So what you're saying is to simplify.
Yes.
Somebody who's self-employed, gig economy worker,
Mm-hmm.
the federal government expanded eligibility to those people. They literally have to apply and be rejected first.
Correct.
Then they can move forward.
Correct.
Right? You need to
Yes.
understand that.
Yes, so file and be denied, and that's how
So
you're
you're getting to the
considered.
point where you've got the programming done for the extension, and you're close to getting the programming done for the $600, but
Mm-hmm.
you may be weeks away from doing the reprogramming necessary for that other federal act.
Wouldn't be weeks, while let Secretary Burns Wallace answer.
So one of the things that we've been doing is that we've tried this kind of with small teams. Right? So please know that there is a team that is working that already. And so while we were dealing with the issues that we were seeing in terms of capacity, we already had another team that has been working that and pulling all of the necessary information, getting the guidance from federal so that we understand what needs to be put in place, and then preparing the code. But we also understand, just like your question before, that it builds on each other. We needed to get this piece of it, as we're going to have to put that piece on top of this piece. The one thing that is important across all of this is that for any of these benefits, there is typically a start date that is identified as those benefits are from X date forward. So anyone who does qualify under those circumstances and it is effective by X date, there is, for our purposes, to get a little bit technical, we actually write two different codes. We write the code effective the day we put it in, and then we write another code because we need to, anyone that we have to go back and do that retroactive, we write that code as well, and then that is activated, and we test both.
So people who are frustrated now, that very first check they get might be for multiple weeks.
Yes, it is retroactive as long as they're answered. So as long as somebody is eligible, yes, the benefits is retroactive. And for PUA in particular, or any of it
goes back to March
29th and then ends at the end of July.
What is the processing time right now from the time somebody applies for the benefits to the time they receive them, and how has that changed? If you could identify what that is now and how that's changed from the last couple of weeks.
I'm sorry, will you repeat the question?
The processing time from the time somebody applies for benefits to the time they actually get their first check.
Yeah, so normally in a normal time period, one would apply and then it would happen the following week, and then it would take 7 to 10 days to receive their money either through debit card or the direct deposit. Right now, since we're in this high volume, we're suggesting people do direct deposit, since that is faster and easier when not having to run into the issues with debit card.
But how long does it take now?
So right now, obviously, it's taking more than 7 to 10 days. Actually, no, it is taking about the same amount of time because we are seeing people receive, and how we know that is our weekly reviews on our website reflect that in the numbers we see. of continued claims and people receiving their money. I did want to make a correction real fast. I said earlier about the PUA, it ends on the 25th. PUA actually ends in December of this year. It's the emergency one that ends of July, the end of July this year.
And you mentioned by.
I've got a question from the Associated Press. Was the modernization canceled after Brownback?
Well, I think we talked about 2011, so if I remember correctly, the answer to that would be yes.
You remember why that was suspended?
Jim, I really don't remember exactly why that happened at that point. I do know, though, that during that entire administration, there was a concerted effort, to really reduce expenditures, and that resulted in a number of projects that had been started being stopped. I also think back to that time when there was shifting of OITS and creating the CETO and moving it out of Department of Administration. So there was a whole lot going on there, and I think this was just one of the victims of that.
You said before you imparted that information initially that there were to respond to some bad information that was being circulated. I mean, what are you making reference there? Because I got an email yesterday with a lot of information relative to the expenditure of the $47 million, with the implication that a lot of money had essentially been wasted. So what are you making reference to when you say that bad information was circulated?
Well, I think, one of the things we said when we took over is that we were going to do a deep dive on all of these kinds of contracts that had been put in place. I don't believe that we went back and looked at the modernization one because that had been so long ago. But we did look back at a number of them, and you can see the result of that. We found a lot of places where there were contracts that were gone into that were not in the best interest of the state, that did not save us money, in fact, cost us money, and didn't deliver. So we canceled a number of those private contracts. And my guess, if we were to go back and look at the modernization one, we would find that there was a lot of wasted money.
But were you aware that there were legislators behind the scenes who were trying to buttress their case that this is your failure by circulating information about the previous attempt to modernize this?
No, they've got that one on me right now. I haven't seen that. I do know that obviously there are a number of legislators who are trying to turn this into something to use against me and claim that we're failing in our attempts to work through this whole entire crisis. But I'm not familiar with specifics about the modernization project, though it doesn't surprise me. I do know that a lot of them are using the problems that we're having in the unemployment processing as a way to challenge our capabilities.
Governor, yesterday when you announced your...
Can I add something to this? Thank you. I do want to add that as I was reviewing of making this a priority, I did look back and to see what was this like. And of course, I was in the state legislature during Governor Sebelius, and under Secretary Garner, he had started the project, and then we know the Great Recession happened. And then they were trying to continue it to, again, move away from the mainframe. And then the secretary that came after him was actually the one that terminated the project and terminated all the vendors. And nothing has been done ever since. So we do know that timeline. Thank you.
Governor, yesterday after you announced your EO and your intent to extend the stay-at-home order, your intent was to do something regional. Within hours, Kansas City, Missouri, and the metro area was already talking about going to May 15th and have gone to May 15th. Do you plan to adjust your stay-at-home order to be in concert with them, or can you talk about how that disparity occurred?
Well, I mean, we did have a very good conversation with the folks from the Missouri side, along with a number of our mayors and county commissioners on the Kansas side. And I think the discussion there was that, we would stay in touch. We might do things a little bit differently depending upon what we thought was in the best interest. What we've done here in Kansas is extend the stay home for 2 weeks statewide. But I've also made it very clear that at the end of those 2 weeks, if we have to, because the pandemic is still rising, then we'll go ahead and extend it statewide again. But if it's not, if we see some leveling off, and particularly as we look regionally, we may then, sort of open up, lift restrictions, statewide restrictions, but then put back in the hands of the locals the authority to impose whatever stay-home guidelines they want to do. That's what was happening before we put the statewide in. That's what we would go back to, because it will be different. I mean, there's, as much, and we waited as long as we could before we put the statewide in. But the locals recognize some need to do that, in Shawnee County and Johnson County and Wyandotte. And I was fine with them doing that. I just felt the need to do it statewide once it started spreading more into our rural areas. As we reverse it, we'll go back the same way. We'll probably lift it. It won't be lifted entirely with no guidelines, but we'll start opening up things in different regions of the state and allow our local units to do what they think is necessary to protect the health and safety of their citizens.
You know there's a group that's planning to come here on April 23rd, a week from today, and stage a protest of some magnitude, maybe stay in their cars, but we're, again, trying to pressure you to quote-unquote reopen the state sooner. What would you want to tell them prior to that happening?
Well, I would want to tell them that that is my 37th wedding anniversary, and hope that they would recognize that. And then I would, I believe in free speech, and as long as they maintain, the mass gathering guidelines and, don't gather groups larger than 10 and keep 6 feet apart, I'm fine.
But do you think the majority of Kansans are with them or with you on this?
I have absolutely no doubt that the vast majority of Kansans appreciate what we have done. That's, we get that all the time. I mean, I've never gotten this much fan mail, quite honestly. It's huge. People really thanking the administration for acting as aggressively and as quickly as we did to protect their lives and the lives of their families. So I'm absolutely confident that they're still there. Are they getting frustrated? Are they getting bored? Are they getting cabin fever? Absolutely. If I were home having homeschooled my own 2 kids, I'd be going bonkers. So I completely get it. But if you look, and there's been some polling done on this too, that even people want us. And when I talk about us, I'm talking about all the governors, to keep in place the systems that protect them, and not to just throw the doors wide open and let this thing start spreading again. People are still worried.
Alluding to off of what Jim said, there's been now flare-ups in Kentucky and yesterday in Michigan that was particularly robust or boisterous. What is your thoughts about these? Do you think these are concerted attempts, or do you think that they're organic?
Oh, I think they're inevitable, particularly, we have become such a polarized, politicized nation that even, we're in the middle of a crisis, and actually people were pretty good for quite a few weeks when everybody was sort of banding together and working together, apparently. Now I think, the politics has just risen again, as it inevitably would, just because we have been for so long now so polarized, and we see this more as a political issue rather than a public health issue, and that's unfortunate. I'm not going to react to that. I am not going to politicize this. I'm going to continue to listen to the scientists, and I'll be working with our business community, and we will figure out a way to reopen our economy safely and efficiently, but in a way that ensures that the public is safe, and ultimately, in the long run, our economy will be better off for it too.
Governor,
the food giveaways have been expanding quite a bit. The one in Topeka here just a couple days ago, just an unbelievable amount. As far as now, Harvesters is having to shut down because of the virus, so there's not those food giveaways what can be done?
Well, I need to look into what we can do about harvesters. I realize that it did shut down, and they are such a huge food distributor in this area, in this region. So we need to figure out some way to make sure that we can resume that. I know in some other states, the National Guard has been called in to assist with food distribution. I have not had that conversation yet with our Adjutant General, but I probably will once exactly what's happening over at Harvesters, why it's happening, and what they are planning to do. And if we need to, I think we'll have to go in and assist them, because we've got to get food to people.
Governor or Secretary Garcia, I've got a question from the KC Star. On what date did Kansas receive federal unemployment funding under the CARES Act, and when did the federal government provide guidance?
Yes, so that was passed the Friday, March 27th. And then we signed it really fast on this next Saturday, which was the 28th. And that Monday, Monday the 29th is when it went into effect. And then we didn't receive guidance until about 11 days later, which was just a week ago.
Okay, one more question.
Thank you.
Garcia, you mentioned earlier how filing by last name now, and you said other states are doing that. How has that been helpful?
Well, with our neighboring state, Colorado, they've said mixed, reviews. It'll have to also be on an honor system. And so this is something that's been a great opportunity to work with a lot of leaders. I mentioned earlier that we've been working with state legislators on the toolkit, so they will also be sharing this. I really do want to applaud both sides of the aisle have been really great with working with my office and sharing the information on the toolkit. So we will be also sharing that on our social media, our website, as well as business leaders and legislators. Thank you.
What was the terminology used for this program?
It's called gating.
Gating?
Gating. Gating.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.